Good evening, people. How are you doing? Welcome to the Sports Therapy Association podcast. My name is 𝗵𝗺𝗀𝗻𝗃. I'm the creator of Unchat Live, and we are recording this live, as always, on the Sports Therapy Association YouTube channel, which means that you can join us if you want to at 8 o'clock every Tuesday by just going along to the YouTube channel. And that's where we are. It gives you a lovely chance to network with the wonderful people who do join us live and also learn a little bit about the STA. We're normally joined by our regional reps, so you can ask questions and talk amongst yourselves. But most importantly, it gives you a chance to speak directly with our very, very special guests, which is probably the biggest benefit of joining us live, if you can. But we do appreciate you listening to the podcast. The numbers are still climbing rapidly, which is wonderful. It's really nice to see. Because all we're interested in is getting the good word of our guests out there. So one thing you can help with if you listen to the podcast is just leave that little 5-star thing. Yeah, leave a review if you want. Words count as well. But the 5 stars or 4, if there is something you didn't like, maybe that's fine. Less than 4, don't worry. You can kind of just jog on. But if it's 4 or 5, then do leave it because it helps the results appear higher up in Google. So, for example, if somebody tonight is interested in feet or foot, or maybe they type as Google search in understanding, I want to understand the foot, then this episode will come up because tonight we have got the Mr. Understander of feet. James Earls is going to be joining us. And this is all part of the countdown for Therapy Expo, which this year is November the 23rd and the 24th at the NEC Birmingham. And what we're doing from now till then is we're going to bring you some of the speakers who are going to be in the dedicated STA Theatre at Therapy Expo across the 2 days. So we're very excited about that. Last week, we had Anna Maria Mazzieri and Paul Coker, who together are going to do a duo presentation called Massage and Manual Therapy, a Modern View. And that will be 9 o'clock on the Thursday, 24th of November in the STA Theatre. Let me bring up a little time schedule here. That was then from last week. I'll put it on big screen so people who have joined us live can have a little look. If you listen to the podcast, you can't see this, but we've got special effects just blinging in and out incredibly on the screen here. So yeah, on the Thursday, join us in the morning. I'll do a little intro at 9 o'clock. I'll be there in person. And then Massage and Manual Therapy, a Modern View will be kicking off Thursday at 9:15. If you missed that episode last week, don't worry. It's on your favorite podcast app waiting for you, including Spotify, or you can watch the video if you want on YouTube, or you can even go to 𝗬STA.co.uk, where there's links there and all the show notes and all the links and all the special stuff which we talked about in the show. For tonight, we're going back to the Wednesday, which is going to start off with the women from 𝗬𝗧𝗔, so Women in Sports Therapy. They're going to be starting off at 9:15 on the Wednesday. And then we got Jenny Burrell, who'll be doing Beyond Pregnancy Massage at 10 o'clock. And then after that, James Earls will be joining us at 11:30 in the STA Therapy Update Theatre, presenting Understanding the Human Foot, which we're obviously very excited about. And James is with us here this evening to give us a little, not just to talk about, or not to discuss what he's going to be talking about, but also about his long career, about the right turns and left turns and reverses and fast forwards, because it's going to be fascinating for all of you. As will soon become very evident. As always, people, if you're joining us live, then feel free to send in questions. I've told James if somebody asks something particularly interesting, then just bring it up. When you do bring something up, then your name will appear and your logo will appear on the screen. Again, you can't see it on the podcast, but at the moment, Alistair Cunningham is saying, evening all. Hello, Alistair. How you doing? Nikki Mansfield is here in a normal, quiet, sheltered, introverted way. Oi, lovely peeps. Really looking forward to this one. So there's Nikki there. Hey, Nikki, thanks for joining us. Becky Carroll's in as well. All the regulars are here who have been with us pretty much 119 weeks in a row. And we love you joining us live because I've always recorded these live. Unchat Live is all about being live because I just think it produces something a little bit more spontaneous and gives you guys a chance to talk to these guests in person. So Ivan Ward, how you doing? Claire Walker is here. Good evening all, says Claire. Hey Claire, thanks for joining us again. Glenn Murphy is in the house as well, saying evening peeps. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, people. It really does make a difference. In fact, I wouldn't do this if it wasn't live. I couldn't just do pre-recorded. It'd be too dull. Anyway, tonight's going to be far from dull. So without further ado, I shall bring up our guest, Mr. James Earls. Hey, James, how you doing?
I am very well, thank you, Matt.
I felt myself digging holes while I was saying left turns, right turns, reversing, fast forwards. I don't know what I was on. I'm sorry.
Well, the interest of it was the long. How many longs were in there? Career.
Well, it's not an insult, is it? I mean, it can be sometimes. There's plenty of people who've been around a long time, and they're still talking about the same thing. But you are not one of them. Okay, this is why
I try not to be.
Yes, well, no, you're definitely not. And you can see when we trace things you've been involved in, things you've done, and even your books. I mean, let's bring up the books. We had this. You were with us not long ago, were you? A couple of months ago, you were with us with 𝗬𝗎 𝗬𝗀𝗀, one of your teams at Born to Move, talking about in our focus of the foot month. But I did bring up then. I'll bring it up again now because I'm just proud about the way I put it together. Let's put it on the full screen so people can see in its full glory. Just some of your books here. So the most recent book, unless you've suddenly produced another one that I'm not aware of, we've got Understanding the Human Foot. And then the Born to Walk, which a lot of people are familiar with, internationally a renowned book. And then we go back to Fascial Release for Structural Balance, which was very huge at the time and translated into 3 languages or something. So there's quite a, I imagine if even we looked through the content of those books, we'd probably see an evolution of thought and the way you explain things. Is that fair enough to say?
I think so, yes. And certainly with Born to Walk, I was privileged given the opportunity to do a second edition, which I think was a big update and an improvement to kind of clarify the story. So yeah, and certainly there's an evolution in there.
How many years was there between the second edition then for Born to Walk?
Born to Walk, I think the first edition came out in 2014, second edition 2020.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, very interesting. Okay, so some updates.
Years.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about these updates with regards to what you practice and preach shortly. But I just want to say thanks again for agreeing to be in the STA Theatre. I'm very excited about that.
Pleased to be asked. Thank you.
Oh, you should be used to this by now, I'm sure. A man of your stature. No, he's shaking his head for those who listen to the podcast. It's so modest as well, as always. As is such a common trait with my guests. But you've been, we were just talking off air, Therapy Expo started 10 years ago, a couple in Manchester, and you remember gracing Manchester for those?
I do. I remember going to the hotel. I remember walking to the venue. And I don't remember actually much of the event.
Right. I'm scared to ask whether that was to do with the social in the evening or whether it was just you were taking in all the information there.
I think it was just taking in all the information. I think I have a tendency to go in, do my thing, and then run away, because the previous 10 or 15 years of my career was spent manning a stand at one of those things. And they're not, I don't find them to be, for myself, the most comfortable kind of physical experience. There's a lot of noise, a lot of light, a lot of concrete. So I tend to go in and run away. But certainly at that time, 10 years ago, but they have got much more comfortable now. I think that the Therapy Expo at the NEC and the way that it's kind of curtained in, it's much more comfortable, a bit more user friendly. It's certainly less cramped space as well. So, and also I'm privileged, I don't have to stand on the stand all day, which I had to for 3 days, just me, once upon a time, back in the day at the RDS in Dublin.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to dig that all up for you. Obviously, it's a bit of a traumatic experience. Yeah. Well, let's move on swiftly. Oh, but it's interesting you say, I think that these events, I remember they were quite in your face and loud and basically selling. It was sell, stand after stand, and that created a lot of the noise.
Yes, it was all about selling. There was nothing about the education. Which is very much, obviously, it's a big thrust within the Therapy Expo. So it was just a sales pitch, constant, everywhere that you went. So I didn't like the experience. Also, didn't like the business model. and because you also had to, the punters had to pay to get in, and they were essentially just paying to get into a marketplace. Whereas with Therapy Expo and many of the other conferences now, they're actually, well, you're paying, but you're paying, if you do have to pay, if you're paying for an education at the same time. And it's also, you got more kind of exposure and more chance to actually have a conversation with the presenters, with the standholders, people like yourselves representing other associations as well.
I think that's that's a very nice, succinct summary of what Therapy Expo has actually turned into, I think, because it is much more now about the education. There's still the stands there. There's still plenty of products if you want to go and buy stuff and test stuff out. But a lot of it now is about the education and also just communication, isn't it? They've provided much more areas now for coffee, for people to chat, to talk. 'Cause that's one of the sells, isn't it, for the therapist? Can I meet with other like-minded individuals? Yeah,
there's a lot more networking, and even I think the stands that are doing the sales, it's much more relationship oriented than it used to be, and where it was just about making the quick buck as quickly as possible and try and get your money back on one of these bloody exhibitions because they're not cheap.
𝗬𝗫𝗂𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀 had a nice, she said something nice last week, which I've been put into effect. I'm going to say it now. She's stopped the word networking now and changed it to support. Isn't that quite nice? Less corporate, isn't it?
That's nice.
A lot more support. That's what we're doing. Because networking makes it sound like, oh, if you do this, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and we'll all come out. It's more support. Just chatting.
And it brings out the social anxiety in me as well. It's like, oh my god, I have a responsibility to be networking. I have to work the room. I have to shake hands and talk to people and it's not good. Support is kind of that. There's a little bit more mutual.
Yeah, definitely mutual. Yes, I like that. And I actually said, I put a post out there saying, because I recognize I'm not one for big crowds as well. I think it's quite funny, people like yourself. I mean, you've had crowds far larger than myself. You've had countries coming to see you, but both of us have probably stood in front of like 500 people presenting stuff. And yet once you get off that stage and you go outside, it's like, right, where's the exit? I'm off. I don't want to hang around. It's quite strange, isn't it? Yeah, well, where's the bar? Exactly. I think it's interesting. It happens quite a lot, but I understand what it's like, particularly if you're by yourself and you're coming to Therapy Expo, and it sounds a bit daunting. The STA stand, or the where we kind of give out all the information and support and stuff, that's opposite the STA Theatre, and I guarantee there'll be regional reps there. There'll be members there, like the beautiful people who join us every week in the live lounge, who will happily spend time with you and just kind of ease you in and just say hi, and before you know it, there'll be a coffee in your hand or tea or biscuits or something, and just have a chat. Especially if it's the first thing in the morning, you're a little bit anxious, you're thinking, oh my god, I've just that kind of, I've just gone to a party I wasn't invited to sensation, and you think everyone there is having a great time and laughing, and you look around and think, oh my god, I've just got to reverse out of here quietly. None of that this year, people. We're really aware of different ways of handling crowds and things, so come along to the STA stand, and I will be there, and so a lot of the speakers will be hanging around as well, just to chill out. It's a safe zone. That's what it is. It's a safe little corner in the massive NEC as it is. Anyway, so James, I love your website, because again, it talks me through so much of what you do. I'm going to bring up a few screenshots again. Apologies if you listen to the podcast, but I will read out what I'm putting up here. So Born to Move is the website, so borntomove.com. And there's a wealth of information on there, and there's also a members login, so you can join up and things like that. The courses, I think, this just shows that you get around. Basically, you were in Northwood recently, off to Lugano, very nice, in October.
Looking forward to that one.
And you've got the stripes hiding it, but you've also got Budapest lined up a couple of times, and you're off to Amsterdam, to Prague.
Yes,
very nice.
So some of that's me, and a lot of it is actually Owen Lewis, who I work with. We set up Born to Move nearly 3 years ago, just before lockdown started. So he's been teaching quite a few of those workshops. He was in Northwood at the weekend when I was presenting it for at a Pilates conference for body control, and he was busy presenting some of his new material, bringing in some of Diane Lee's work, and creating a blend from assessment and soft tissue. So he's teaching his own workshop, and then helping me teach some of the Born to Move and Born to Walk workshops as well. So I'd like to kind of spread it around a little bit.
It's true. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I always forget about Owen Lewis. How did you meet Owen? Maybe that's a little bit of a way to start.
I met on. It was whenever I was teaching anatomy twins, so back in the day. I can't remember the year, but it's probably 10 to 12, 10 to 12 years. And he did anatomy twins, and then went through, did the full kind of structural integration training, kinesis myofascial integration as it was back then, and then he carried on. He has had a thirst. He's a seeker. He's a thinker. He's a deep worker. He's never satisfied. Always looking for the something else. How can he make it better? So he went off following that and did a lot of work with Diane Lee. Went through her training. Was managed to beg and scrape his way into her training, because it's usually just physiotherapists that be accepted. But with his background in elite sports and teaching sports, sports psychology, as well as the good depth of understanding physical therapy, of manual therapy, he was allowed in and became quite friendly with Leanne, and has permission to teach the elements that he teaches on the workshops from her. So that's wonderful. And I think Nikki and a few other people were there last weekend, which is really his first outing in the real world with the workshop. So it all went.
Oh wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
So for those who listen to the podcast, Nikki Mansfield has given her seal of approval with Owen's workshop this weekend. Was amazing, and an emoticon with eyes. Thanks, Nikki, for your. You should send that, I think, to Owen. He'll appreciate that. So you mentioned Anatomy Trains. So Anatomy Trains has got a massive stamp in our history, and rightfully so. I suppose when it came along, it was particularly well received, and an awful lot of people did the course, bought the book. And then you kind of moved eventually slightly away from it with Owen, by the sounds of it. Yeah. Why was that?
I think, like many things, time to move on to a slightly different emphasis, different story. There were a number of reasons. One of which was just I was burnt out. I was teaching the material every weekend, and quite often during the week as well. So I was telling the same story again. And once, after a while, you just get into the script, and it's basically you just turn up, as with Manchester 10 years ago, just turn up, switch on, do your spiel, bugger off, go to the next venue, turn up, switch that spiel on. So eventually I got bored listening to myself. So I thought it's kind of time to move on. And also was going through the Anatomy Trains kind of teaching program. I wanted to do something a little bit different, as Owen did as well. I trained with Gary Gray and did the functional movement training, and realized that actually movement was something that was a big missing part of the puzzle. That for me as a manual therapist, I remember doing some early trainings with Tom and with other people, and there was always maybe the token yoga teacher or Pilates teacher in the room, and we'd be doing our manual therapy, proper, good, authentic, proper manual therapy, and the movement teachers going, "What are you doing with this person flat on the table and just mushing their tissue? Why don't you have them up moving?" I always thought, be kind to the yoga and Pilates people, because they don't understand. They don't understand the power of soft tissue work, and they think it's all about movement. And then realizing eventually, slow learner, after 22 years in the business, it's like, oh, actually, and it's such a simple question to me. Why are we doing the work that we do? Well, one, we might be trying to get them out of pain and discomfort, which is a big topic, I know. But also, we're doing it to try and make them more successful in their real, normal, everyday life. And, well, lying on a table and having me pull and push them in certain directions, or faff about with their soft tissue and find trigger points or not, stretch them or not, whatever it is, it's like it's so out of context that actually putting some movement, and whether you want to call it functional movement or just movement or exercises or whatever, into the therapy just for me made it so much more contextual, gave me a lot more information about what might be going on with the client, engages the client much more in the process. Because have I frozen?
No. I'm just mesmerized. Sorry, I'm going to move around now and again. I'm just really listening. I'm taking in every word. Sorry, I'll move now and again to let you know.
I've frozen on my screen. So
no, I can still hear you.
Okay. So it's weird looking at me not moving whilst I'm moving. So my apologies. So it put the treatment in much more context, involves the client much more in the process. They learn so much more. And also it was really the time that brought anatomy alive for me, because I had, like so many of us, gone through the standard approaches to teaching anatomy, which is if we throw all of these bits at you, somehow you'll remember them and somehow you'll put them all together and just kind of understand how the body works, but just don't ask me. And then it's a gradual kind of, we're talking about evolution of the exhibition and evolution in general. My evolution at the moment is I think we teach anatomy in the wrong direction. I think we start from the bits and we try to build up to the big picture, and I don't think that works. At least it didn't work for me, and it doesn't work for most people I talk to. I think if we start from movement and what we actually do, and start from the observation, and then put it in context of the anatomy, that makes much more sense. So probably I moved. So coming back to your original question, I moved from a very structural, postural based view of kind of analysis and assessment and approach and goals within the treatment, to being much more functionally literate, functionally oriented. And I think it's going back the history of structural integration with Dr. Rolf, that group has split because of coming up against this and other questions. So other people went more functional, they stayed more structural. Other people went more psychological, they stayed a little bit more kind of body centered. And so really myself and Tom just kind of, we were going in different paths. There was at one stage almost a European school and an American school that was kind of, to borrow the Guild of Structural Integration, the American school was true to the teachings of Tom Myers, and the European school was kind of using the teachings of Thomas Myers with a bit of James, with a lot of Gary Gray kind of thrown in alongside. And it's like, well, eventually it was like, well, it's not authentic. So I thought it's time to go, and also time to free myself up, because there are certain things within the anatomy trainings that don't stand up. The research is kind of challenging some of the ideas, some of the stories. So it's like, well, I would prefer to stand up and say what I'd believe to be true. So I was trying to be authentic.
Fantastic. Very nice. Yeah, that's a wonderful explanation. And what year are we talking about when did you do Gary Gray? When did you do
Gary Gray? I did the GIF training in 2012.
2012, right? Okay, yeah. That was a big year, wasn't it? Those kind of around that era was, people were thinking and moving on. Was it difficult for you first? Because I'm interested, because you were very much part of teaching anatomy trains and very much in there and well known for it. Was there a kind of a period where it was like, did you go through these initial emotions of anger and frustration at suddenly being told this isn't quite right, or embarrassment or sadness, or were you already kind of thinking, hold on, I'm missing something here?
So yes, all of that, and a number of other people have left. You mentioned one, but there are other teachers as well, and some of them, because I'd left first, and because I had been so deeply involved, I became kind of an exit counsellor. I'm going to use a C word, which is not an accusation of them, but it was like leaving a cult, because you get caught up with the ideas and the personalities and the, it's not quite a family, but there's a certainly a community aspect, and so there is an exit process that can be, depending on the reason why you're leaving, can be angry making, it can be disappointing, it can be frustrating, it can be totally very freeing, as it was in my case, to kind of tell my own story. And that was really the difference between the first and the second edition of Born to Walk.
Right.
So in the first edition, I had to, and I did it consciously and willingly, I squeezed the model of walking into the model of anatomy trains. And then gradually, with telling the story, I realized, well, actually, no, that was a squeeze. I was shoehorning things in, and one of the things I react against is what I call anatomy stories, where it's like, oh, when people look at something and project the anatomy onto what they're seeing, rather than seeing what they're seeing and trying to interpret the anatomy, so kind of in the other direction. And I realized that that's what I had done. I tried to squeeze the anatomy of anatomy trains into the story of Born to Walk. So that's not authentic. So some of it fits, some of it, I would still kind of use that elements of the story, and some of it just doesn't hold up as strongly as it should. So there was anger, there was frustration, there was disappointment, there was sense of freedom, and I'm missing, I would still miss some of the personalities, some of the friends that are still there.
Cool. But you came through, after going through those emotions, you came out feeling stronger and able to help more people, and it was a positive experience then.
Absolutely, because now I'm free. I'm free to evolve. One of the strengths perhaps of anatomy trains is that it's a very strong story. It's a very strong model in the story that's around it. But one of the weaknesses is that it's because it's trademarked and it's protected, and it's not just anatomy trains. There are many other, maybe, not necessarily larger schools, but similar ways of thinking that are so embedded within their model and embedded within the marketing machine that's behind them, that actually they can't adapt. It's talking about the economy and the time it takes to change the direction of a tanker. So changing the tanker that was anatomy trains into something else that's just takes a lot more energy, and I think perhaps I can be more nimble to updating. Whenever I read a research paper, or when I go to another workshop and hear something that's a little bit more correct or a little bit less wrong than whatever I've been saying, then I can make that change. Whereas with the larger organizations, you have to go through each of the layers and levels to make sure that actually that it's still approved.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I like that, actually. Can you expand on, we've talked about this before, but for just people listening to the podcast, you just went be a little bit more correct, and then you tilted your head and said, or maybe a little bit less wrong. Can you expand on that? Why do you make that distinction?
Oh, I think it was commenting on discussions that have happened through social media, and I think there was a trend in soft tissue therapy to kind of aim for being less wrong. And there's a negative, I think for myself, I think there's a negative connotation in that. Well, that's assuming that I've been really wrong, and I'm just getting less wrong with the progression, as opposed to essentially saying the same thing and trying to be more correct or getting closer to the truth. It's a more positive viewpoint. I know we have Caroline Williams is coming to an event that we're organising her book. I don't know if you've read the book Move. Mm-hmm. Just called Move, and one of the stories in it that she tells is about vision and about the difference in perception whenever moving forward to moving back. And moving forward is full of optimism and expectation, and just physically retreating, and that from the visual field that has a less positive effect on creativity and mind. I can't remember the full story. So so the tilt of my head was a acknowledgement of the phrase that's already been going around. But I would use, my preference would be to get closer to correct.
Okay, I like it. That's beautiful because it's all open to interpretation. I can see I like the expression less wrong. I think it depends, doesn't it, on where the therapist is in their journey, in their career and everything. I think for a while it's nice to be able to accept the fact, yeah, okay, what I thought was just concrete wasn't concrete. Okay, so now I'm going to evolve a little bit. And I don't know exactly how massage reduces stress and anxiety. It's been shown in good studies that it does. I'm not quite sure how. We've got these methods and systems. But what I do know is I'm not actually breaking down scar tissue. I'm not increasing circulation because physically I can't, sort of thing. So I like that expression of less wrong. But then, yeah, you've taken it to another level where you could actually do yourself, a misjustice if you do keep saying less wrong. It's kind of a...
Personally, I find it a little disempowering.
But then, interesting enough, and I'm sorry this bores the hell out of you, you guys have to ask some questions here because this guy just fills me with interesting questions and ideas. When you talked about moving forwards is full of optimism and stepping back is not. For me, stepping back gives you maybe it's because I drive a motorbike, but when you step back, it gives you a wider point of view to be able to see what's going on. You can take more in. Sometimes you've got to step back to have a bigger picture. That's what entered my head, but it's all open to interpretation, isn't it?
Yep.
It's good. Okay, so yeah, critical thinking. Basically, I think having the go on.
Absolutely, I take the point of being less wrong. I'm embedded within the acknowledgement of what's called the half-life of truth. There was a wonderful book called the half-life of truth, written by a history of science lecturer. I mean, it's a whole book on the turnover of science, and it's essentially everything that we've just been talking about, just the being less wrong, or being that movement to being hopefully more correct or more accurate. And there are people that actually study this turnover of science, and I think that is one of the huge steps in our evolution as soft tissue therapists in the broadest sense. Because in that book, he said one of the things about different disciplines, whether it's maths or architecture, engineering, dentistry, surgery, whatever, they all have a different speed at which they turn over their truths. And that speed is determined by the number of people that are involved with each of the professions, and also the quality of their discussion and, for want of a better word, their networking abilities. So their communication ability, whether that be professional associations, professional magazines, professional meetings. And so the more of those, the better developed, and the more of them that we have, then the quicker we move through those less accurate statements and get closer to accuracy, because there's a better discussion, better quality of discussion, and that quicker turnover. So I think that's one of the wonderful things about what you're doing with the podcast, what you're doing with the STA, and also with Therapy Expo, that it is a melting pot. And you mentioned, there's a slightly different style perhaps to the speakers of 10 years ago to today. But I think we need something else that each profession needs is somebody coming in and stirring it up, and being an agitator or provocateur, or just something to provoke. We need the Paul Ingrams, we need the Jack Chews, whoever they may be. We need them to actually question ourselves.
Fantastic. I'm going to do a little refresh of the screen. In theory, there might be a quick second pause because your face is it's like being made up in a different. It's like a vaudeville thing. I don't know what's going on with the cam, so I'm just going to hit the refresh button. Nothing should go wrong. Reload. Okay, and after that, we should still just be here again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, but I'm still frozen.
Oh, hold on.
For me.
There could be a reason for that. Right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yep.
I can't hear you for some reason. Hold on a second. There's definitely something going on with the connection here. Bear with me. Let's hide that. Sorry if you listen to podcasting. I'll probably edit this out. Right, let's try that. How's that?
That I'm still frozen, but can you hear me?
Right, so we've lost a little bit of sound. Let me try it once more. The picture was about to go, so I'm going to. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think it's cool. Yeah, it's still a bit weird, your camera. That's okay. It was just for people watching live. Let me know in the notes, somebody, if it's in the live lounge, if you have got James's camera kind of going a bit weird now and again, or whether it's all. If you're hearing it fine, that's all we need to know. Becky Carroll says, I think being less wrong acknowledges that science is constantly evolving. Correct sounds more absolute. Will we ever be there? Will we ever be there? It's true. Will we ever absolutely totally understand how humans work? Probably not. Let's hope not, because it'd be a dangerous world if we did. It'd be quite scary if we knew exactly how we worked.
It's true.
Good. Becky said she's still here, both of us, so we will persevere. So, right, I want to go back to your website, and now we've got that. That's a fantastic foundation of everything you're about and how you've moved and evolved. So a lot of people will be familiar with Anatomy Trains, and in all honesty, I think it's still one of the books which is recommended on a lot of massage courses and sports massage courses, because a lot of those courses are being taught by people maybe who haven't evolved either, who have got a business model, who have got exams published and syllabi which it'd be too expensive to modify, especially when they're kind of international or national syllabus, which it would just be a nightmare to try and change it for everybody. So we do still get reading lists. I get emails saying, what do you think of these books? And it's like, fine, if you're back in the 80s, then go and get that book by so-and-so or so-and-so. But there's more. I'm always quick to say, at the time, these were groundbreaking. They were fantastic. They were amazing. In fact, they were all ahead of their time. But like most people, true great minds have been ahead of their time, like people like Paul Hodges with the whole kind of transversus, the multifidus and everything, and the idea of it firing before, was quick later on to say, oh, actually, hold on, we've done a few more studies now, and I just want to kind of change my mind a bit, but it was too late. The new version of Pilates has been sold, and the same thing happened with fascia, and 𝗫𝗫𝗁 later on said, oh, slight problem, yeah, these people are all dead, I need to change this a little bit now. Actually, it's not quite the same as that, but it's the marketing and the DVDs which come out and then they can't change, it's too late. So you do have to be critical of the reading lists which you are given, especially if the books are slightly old. But anyway, so that's why I want to go to your website, if I may, because you put on some courses which help people evolve. I want to bring these up for people who are watching the live stream. You break them down to 3 courses. Let's put this into a solo so you can see it. And I want you to talk me through who you would recommend these for, whether everybody should do all 3 or whether a certain person should go to 1. You've got Move to Integrate. For people who can't see the screen, I've got the 3 courses which you can see on borntomove.com if you just click on courses. We've got Move to Integrate, which is a 3-day course, which James is going to talk about now, and then Born to Walk for 3 days, and then Born to Move. What are they?
So Move to Integrate is that's Owen's workshop that he was just teaching last weekend up in Northwood, and that is his dissemination of and blending with Diane Lee's work, the functional work that I've kind of brought into bodywork, and really kind of drilling down into how can we make assessment as accurate as they can be. trying to answer a lot of the questions around accuracy of palpation, for example, around pelvis, PSIS and the landmarks. So kind of bringing to body workers, especially kind of manual therapists across the board, clear rationales from a full body point of view of how to identify and treat an area of the body that may be causing the pain and discomfort that, from a biomechanical sense, that a client might be experiencing. And it's not purely biomechanical. Owen has also done a lot of the pain science work, so it's acknowledging kind of the full BPS model. So it's blended in there. So Move to Integrate is kind of it's an update. So it's not just your standard STORT test. It's not just your standard straight leg raise. It's taking many of the questions, many of the criticisms of the standard orthopedic assessments, and updating them and bringing them to a more rational, more defendable model, a less wrong model.
So maybe for listeners, then, you mentioned stalk test, for example, which that's probably something I know it's I'm pretty sure on all level 4 courses, if people are doing them for sports massage or sports therapy massage, it would be introduced. I think it's still taught as an advanced test. If you go up to level 5 or something, they probably focus on it even more. So just for people who are listening live and have downloaded the podcast, what are some of the updates and the takeaways for that when you're doing a test like that?
So for a STORT test, some of the do you mean the criticisms or some of the
updates? And whether they're
the criticism would be the PSIS is one of probably the most unreliable bony landmark in your body. It's been tested many times that there is very low, if any, inter or intra therapist reliability on identifying the PSIS. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh my God, well, obviously they haven't had me. They have not tested me and my superior palpation skills. And then realized, no, that was just talking as much crap as everybody else. Whenever I was thinking that I was finding the PSIS, if the head physiotherapy surgeons, whatever, can't find the PSIS, then what bloody chance do I have?
So sorry, we can't gloss over this, because I'm conscious that, and I don't want people listening to the podcast, and I have to remind myself of this. This might come as a shock. Hopefully it will come as a shock to maybe half of you, which is 1,200 of you, because you've probably just come off a course where a major part of it in the morning, and then the morning after to check you've actually taken it in, was about palpating each other's PSIS and using that to estimate whether the pelvis was tilting down. Now you've got this guy here, James Earls, saying that it's not that accurate. And in fact, even with experts, if you get a bunch of experts to look at them, the results will differ as to their shape and their size, and whether one's higher or lower than the other, and all sorts of things. So that's a scary thought, because that sounds like it's going to undermine probably 1 day out of the 6 you've had, like in the last month or something. Now, which means we got to be careful, and this is what this podcast is all about, hopefully, and we've made that quite clear. Does that mean the whole course needs to be thrown away and there's no point being a soft tissue therapist? He said, obviously, with a loaded question. Or how do you move on from that? I suppose you explain this in the course, but how do you deal with that and not think, oh my God, if that's not true, what's all the rest they've been telling me then?
Well, then there are other landmarks and other ways of getting very similar information. So rather than using the PSIS, finding the inferior lateral angle on the sacrum, and also then, rather than using the PSIS on the ilium, using the iliac crest, and then measuring the differences between those two very accurate and reasonably reliable. You still need a little bit of training. And the fact, so in the STORT test, you're trying to measure what is a 3 millimeter movement, if you're lucky. Whereas if your hands are separated between the inferior lateral angle and around the iliac crest, that movement of 3 millimeters. So if you think of kind of moving your elbow, if you're measuring the movement at your elbow off your elbow, there's very little movement. But if you're holding your wrist and moving your elbow 2 or 3 degrees, then it's like things get magnified because of the distance. So it actually makes the movement much more easily palpated. So that and many others. I have not had the fortunate experience of being in the classroom with Owen whilst he's teaching all of these. So for further information, just send us an email or ask Nikki.
We had a little, or John W. He said earlier on, I'm bringing this up on the screen. John W. says it was a fantastic weekend with Owen and moved to integrate inspirational. John's word used that word, so there you go.
Yeah, and as Becky also pointed out, the pelvis is so, we're trying to find the PSIS and the ASIS, and then depending which book you read, is it 10 to 15 degrees of difference? Is it 1 to 3 centimeters of height difference? Or are they horizontal? But the old research that I quoted, and it's one of the proud moments of the Fascial Release for Structural Balance book, is that I put this research in there way back that 𝗏𝗏𝗏 University of, I think it was Liverpool, could be Manchester, compared the cadaver pelvises of, I think it was 30 pelvises, and found they put them all in the universal plane, which was the ASIS and the pubis on a table, so that they could then measure the angle between the AS and PSIS. And in a sample size of 30, they found a variation between 0 degrees with perfect right angle and 23 degrees, which is a huge amount of variation. And I think it was 23. It's vague in my head. It's many years since I read the original paper. And they also, I reread it a few years ago for another project, and they also compared left and right from the standard, and the left and right ASIS measurements varied between 0, so both symmetrical, and 5 degrees. So even within a person, you can have up to a 5 degree, possibly even more because it was a small sample, 5 degree difference in AS to PSIS angle. So, there's quite another common measurement for kind of pelvic rotation is to find the ASIS, pretty reliable landmark. And then we feel it's one further forward and down, and then we make all kinds of conclusions from that. But actually, I don't know. Am I measuring a 0 perfectly symmetrical pelvis, or is this person just a 5 degree increase difference on the left person? So we need a lot of other ways of gathering as much information as possible.
Okay, very interesting. And if we're using these tests to sign along the dotted line that this is why the person's coming to us in back pain, then that's dangerous because we're missing all the other factors which we should be considering. That's the danger, isn't it? Okay. Nikki Mansfield actually says here, I'll bring it up on the screen. Nikki Mansfield says, the palpation skills taught in Move to Integrate to a whole other level, massively improving my assessment specificity already, though I have a long way to go to reach James and Owen's level. Exactly. Yeah, you're not putting that hair in the yellow pages and feeling it with your elbow yet. Can't quite get that, can you, Nikki? Yet? Keep practicing. Keep practicing. Okay, right. I'm conscious of the time, so that's brilliant. So that's all about updating the assessment and everything. What about? Let me just bring this up on there. So, Born to Walk, 3 days.
Born to Walk. I deliberately designed it for movement and manual therapists. So again, just across the board, as probably less of a gait assessment and more of a let's get together and understand myofascial skeletal movement and use walking as the kind of the consistent vocabulary to understand how all of that interacts and interplays, and trying to answer what's been a regular question in my head of why are we the shape that we are? Why as a species, why do we stand up and walk the way that we do? Why do we run the way that we do? So it's really trying to expose my answers to those questions using a lot of research, a lot of time that I've spent, including doing a master's degree in human anatomy and evolution. So trying, that's not just my opinion on how we walk and how we move and how all of that interacts. It's as evidence-based as I can make it. And also my story of how it all kind of, all those, the different elements fit together in the story. So that's it. And then Born to Move is a 3-day workshop in which we teach 101, I've no idea how many, 101 manual therapy techniques without ever touching a therapy table. So
sounds glorious.
So it's 3 days, and we don't even have a table in the room. So everyone's standing, moving knees, moving arms, moving heads. And one of the wonderful things that Tom's Anatomy Drains book did bring to the market was the idea of tensegrity. I know there are kind of the left and right wings of everything. I find the idea, the picture, the model of the human body as a tensegrity system to be useful, because it gets away from the isolation of anatomy and orthopedic assessments, and gives a vocabulary to explain why is it. So my standard workshop, I'm sure I'll do it at Therapy Expo, it's turn to your right when you're standing, and as you turn, your left foot pronates, your right foot supinates. Your left knee laterally rotates, your right knee medially rotates, your right hip medially rotates, your left hip medially laterally rotates, blah, 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 all the way through. It's a workshop that's teaching technique on how to work with the medial or lateral rotators, how to work with a pronation or supination and through the feet, how to improve spinal movement. And it's 101 techniques, and which I don't actually care one slot about any of the techniques, because they're purely to teach functional anatomy and kind of tensegrity anatomy, functional anatomy, anatomy of movement, the reality of movement, whatever the heck you want to call it, pick your own favorite word. It's how do we as a body respond whenever we make movements, and how can I, as a therapist, hopefully intervene in a useful way that's going to be comfortable, supportive for the client, and whether that's intervening with soft tissue in whatever way, or whether it's intervening with the nervous system, or whether it's just giving kind of comfort and security, confidence back to the client as they're making a movement that they haven't been able to make, then that's it. So it's kind of 3 days of putting anatomy in context, but doing that through teaching techniques.
Brilliant. No, sounds like that's putting into effect exactly what you started off with. You said the anatomy is taught in the wrong way. Take all the little bits and then put them all together and understand how we move. You've done it the other way around. Let's get moving. And now I'm going to start introducing. Brilliant. Wonderful. Nikki has said here, your PA has said, some of my fave part of these your workshops have been the mic drops on anatomy and motion. Will you ever run workshops specifically on relearning anatomy from a movement point of view?
Okay, it's almost like set up for the...
Well, funny you should say that, Nikki.
I just happen to be writing a book.
Oh, do you? Oh, wow, I didn't know that either.
So, another one. So the one I'm writing at the moment is...
Are you sure you want to reveal this? I don't want you to regret this when you wake up in the morning. Have you told anyone else this? Or is this an exclusive?
Oh no, it's practically finished. So
okay,
it should be finished in the next week or so. It's just on how to understand movement. It's the vocabulary of movement. Because I think one of the things I learned whenever going through the Gary Gray training, through that training, I tell the story many times, but through that training, there were so many moments where I just got angry. It's like, why is it taking me 20 years for somebody to tell me that actually there's a language to clearly describe bone and joint movement? And it's all there. But it's so ignored in the literature and ignored by those that taught me anatomy. And so few people know the difference between a medial rotation of the hip and a medial rotation of the femur. I wasn't trained in being clear and precise with the language whenever I was describing. I didn't know movement, so I wasn't really describing it whenever I was trying to teach anatomy. But anytime I did give it a go, it was all over the place, but nobody cared because they didn't know that I didn't know that they didn't know that nobody knew how they actually to language movement. And I think that's why we have such our profession, I think we have a poor understanding of movement. So this is going to be my attempt to bring some of that vocabulary and clarity that it can give into our world.
Sounds great. I never knew that. I didn't realize that was in the pipeline. Exciting.
Yeah, and with being honest of the source, that it's Gary Gray derived. It's but nobody else seemed to have done it. It was my publisher said, "Oh, James, can you do a long chain stretch movement book?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I can," because they sell. It's like, because you look at any of the stretching books, which are all the bloody same, they sell thousands and hundreds of thousands, and my books don't. I was like, okay, yes, great, I can do that. And then I sat down to write it, and I thought, oh, this is just such a lie. It's just, I'm just going through the motions. So where he thought it would take 3 months because you just kind of churn through it, it's actually taken guts for a year.
Wow.
But it's still a short book. But
wow, that's very exciting. There you go, Nick. You didn't expect that, did you? Exclusive on the Sports Therapy Association podcast. New book, soon to be released.
New book. And so that will kind of feed into new workshops and new events. So that was teaching some of that material for the Pilates instructors, because it was a surprise to me. I was always scared teaching anatomy to movement teachers, because I always thought they understood movement. And then I realized they don't understand movement. They understand exercises. And that's different. So,
excellent. Right. Well, look, time is reaching that 9 o'clock, that hour. So just John W. is a little question here. That sounds amazing. Look forward to reading that one after the other books have answered questions and raised more at times. It's great, isn't it, when things raise more questions? It's lovely. Yeah, no, I'm very excited about that. So the good news is you guys, if you've enjoyed what you're listening to today, and that goes for people listening to the podcast, then we have got the good fortune to have James Earls coming to Birmingham to the NEC at Therapy Expo 2022. He'll be with us on day one, which is the Wednesday, the 23rd of November, at 11:30 a.m. In the STA Theatre, with a presentation on understanding the human foot. In a nutshell, I've asked this, I think, last week to Anna Marie and Paul Coker, but then for people who are umming and ahhing about whether to come to your, unfortunately, we only get half an hour with you, but in your mind, what would you like people who, soft tissue therapists who come to see your presentation, kind of walk away with on the day? What would you like them to walk away with?
I think for me, my major goal is now to make that link between anatomy and understanding movement. So it's putting function, it's being able to see with an X-ray vision that whenever you look at the foot and see it moving, foot and ankle, when you see it moving, you can see the anatomy, you can see what's happening, what's not happening. So it's being able to do that projection.
Fantastic. Great. Well, it's a great opportunity for you people. And I hope that if you are debating whether or not to come to Birmingham, then I'm not getting paid anything for Therapy Expo. It's just I really believe that it's turning a curve now. I think there's a great, since COVID, I don't know how connected it is with COVID, but now people are actually talking to each other. Therapists are sharing truths, and suddenly everyone's much more receptive, and you can get much more support by going to these events, in the words of Anna Marie 𝗵𝗫𝗫, rather than networking. It's not networking anymore. It's called support. And that's what it's all about. And even if you don't get to see everyone you want to see, you sit down, have a coffee and chat with other therapists. It's going to be great. I'm really excited about it. And again, James, I'm really thankful that you're going to be part of it. So really excited about that. Right then, I need to wrap it up. It's 8:59. I'm sure you've got places to go to and things to eat and things to do. So thank you very much, everyone who's joined us live. It really makes it worthwhile for me. The day that no one turns up at 8 o'clock is when we'll just call it a day, and that hasn't happened in 119 weeks. So thank you very much. James, again, thank you for coming and being a guest and giving up your time. Really appreciate it. We'll be back next week, because next week Tuesday will be the first of the month. It'll be the first Tuesday in October. Then we do our regular STA catch up. So we'll have a little chat. Gary Benson, founder of the STA, will be here as far as I know. Hopefully we'll have again maybe Dr. Fiona Higgs from Women in Sports Therapy. The WIST podcast will be along, maybe regional rep coordinator, maybe it could be along, and other members from the STA team. Some of the regional reps, if you listen to this and you fancy coming out, if you've got something to say or to talk about, any comments on what we've done this month and who we've listened to, then that's what it's all about. So next week, if you do fancy joining us live, if you listen to the podcast, then just head along to the Sports Therapy Association YouTube channel at 8 o'clock and you can join in the chat. It'd be a great chance, these STA catch-ups, to ask industry questions as well, in case you've got any on any topic to do with soft tissue therapy. So that's it, people. Thanks very much. Again, thanks, James.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for listening and joining in.
Fantastic. Hopefully we'll see some of you live next week, Tuesday.